Welcome to the Navigating Digital Payments podcast, brought to you by Worldline, bringing you the latest innovations, trends, and predictions about the future of payments.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Navigating Digital Payments podcast. I'm David Daly. I look after the scientific community here at Worldline, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Sunil Rongala. Sunil is our Senior VP for Strategy, Innovation and Analytics at Worldline India. Hi Sunil, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, David. Good to be here.
Great to have you joining us. And the topic that we're going to discuss today is the maybe slightly controversial question of, does in-store retail have a future? As a reminder for our listeners, every episode of the podcast, we're discussing a different chapter from the Navigating Digital Payments paper that we published last year. Today, I thought it would be really interesting to start with looking at what's been behind the growth of online shopping, then kind of come back and look at what are some of the benefits of in-store retail, and then cover some of the challenges that are being faced by retailers and how they can overcome them. So before we jump into that topic of in-store retail, maybe Sunil, you could start by sharing a few of your thoughts about what has led to the rise in online retail.
There have been multiple factors that have led to the rise in online retail. Primary has been pricing. If you shop at an Amazon or other online stores, you notice a significant price difference between what you see online and what you would buy in a store. The next would be just the availability of products on an online store, because theoretically you can have millions, and which is obviously not possible in an offline store, in a physical store. The reality is that you won't be shopping for all 1 million, or you're not looking for that 1 million. But I think consumers just like to have that idea that it's possible, that they have choice to shop there. The other thing that's really pushed online is the improvement in logistics that's happened. If a number of stores, online stores, usually now deliver the same day itself, or 1 day shipping or 2 day shipping. So I think consumers are willing to wait for that. If they get a good deal, they're willing to wait for a couple of days or a day itself in a lot of cases. So that's really pushed. And obviously, if you look at the UI, UX of all these websites, it's so easy to navigate, it's so easy to buy items. And if you think of payments also, payments has become so seamless on a lot of these online websites. And that's also contributed in a large way to the growth of online shopping, and obviously that has taken a bite out of offline shopping, and this was well before the pandemic started itself.
And the way you talk about those different aspects, Sunil, I wonder if there's almost like phases that it's gone through, because I remember when I was first buying books online, probably 20 years ago or so, and there it really was price driven. You know, it was significantly cheaper than going to a bookstore. But I had a case, I think last year, where I actually bought something online for a slightly higher price, because I knew that their exchange and their refund policy and the logistics and the delivery was all so efficient and so much better than I could expect from the comparable shop that I was looking at on the high street. So do you think there has been an evolution where it's transitioned from perhaps originally just being about a price benefit to now also being about convenience and other aspects of using online shops?
Absolutely, and you would have seen this convenience factor increase tremendously during the pandemic. And so I think the rise of the pandemic has also led to these online stores not necessarily having to compete with the physical stores. So they didn't necessarily need to price lower because you were sort of a captive buyer from them. So that's happened. But I still think despite that, you still, I made my first buy, I think, on Amazon.com in the US in 97, and the website doesn't look like how it does now. But I was, at that point of time, I was absolutely floored that I could get, CDs, at that time, CDs, books, in a couple of days. And the choices that I had was just amazing. And I remember buying my very first laptop in 2000 on a site called Best Buy, and receiving it in 2 days' time, and it was about $500 or $600 cheaper than if I had gone to the store itself. That's there, and I think as you see the evolution of how online has sort of transitioned, even if you look now, if you're shopping at a lot of these websites that I'm just going to give a name like Gap for clothing. The pricing online is about 30 to 40% cheaper than if you go to the Gap store. So uh, there is that strategy that they're using, but a lot of retailers are kind of, as they're trying to go to this omni-channel kind of approach, they're realizing that they don't need the infrastructure, the sort of store infrastructure that they would need. So they're able to sell at a discount, which they would otherwise have spent on this infrastructure.
But also, because you mentioned buying a laptop, and I think, again, probably around about the same time, I bought my first laptop online, and it was from Dell, and they had a configuration tool, so you could specify the memory and the processor and different options on the laptop. And again, I just think of that as an example where in a shop, if you did that, you'd then have to come back the next day to collect it once they've built it. Whereas, of course, when it's an online order, they can do the customization in a day and then ship it the next day. And the experience is very similar for a customized item as it is for a kind of non-customized item.
I think an example to that would be travel, because I would rather go online and sort of discover which flight I can take or which hotel I can take, as opposed to going to a travel agency and sitting with someone. And because I think there's also that sort of thrill of doing it DIY kind of. Uh,
I mean, my dad also especially used to love hunting for a bargain. This was and often online. But
yeah.
I also, I remember shopping experiences as a child kind of being dragged around the shops, because actually if you want to compare the price between 10 physical shops, there's a lot of walking involved is all I'm going to say. Whereas, of course, online you can actually very quickly compare the price, and there are, of course, even tools to help you compare the price.
The other thing that I found very nice online is the ratings of products. Because I understand there's a science to this rating of products. Most people will rate it. If you just ask them, they'll rate it 5, unless they have some real grievance about it. But if you look at products that have had like about 2,000, 3,000 reviews, it sort of evens out. So that is a big factor for a lot of people, and including me, when I make a decision, whether it's a hotel, whether it's a pant or a shirt. Ratings matter. If I go to a store, you're looking at it, you're feeling it, and but that's another experience which I love too. But it's just that aspect of 2,000 people can't be wrong.
Exactly. And I guess the point is that once upon a time, you may have gone to your local shop where the shopkeeper was someone you knew. And if they made a recommendation for a product, you would trust them and be guided by them. And as you say, in the online world, that's perhaps been replaced more by community ratings of other customers. So that's a really interesting point. You mentioned, Sunil, a few times the pandemic, and in the chapter in Digital Payments where we talked about the renaissance of physical stores, one of the topics that was mentioned was the impact of the pandemic. So let's now just hear an extract from that chapter read by our voiceover artist Louise Freer-Jones.
As large portions of the world's population have been forced into lockdowns and face limited mobility due to COVID-19, there has been further acceleration and acceptance of e-commerce as a preferred way for many customers to shop. However, the real-world social contact and engagement during a shopping experience that is important for so many is not easily replicated in a digital environment. And we believe that consumer demand for in-person, physical, bricks-and-mortar shopping is going to reappear in large parts of the market.
So, Sunil, before we heard that extract, we talked quite a bit about some of the benefits and advantages of online, but you also mentioned that there are things about the in-store experience that are also very appealing. Can you talk a little bit more about some of those unique benefits of in-store retail?
Sure. So I think all of us, I mean, at the end of the day, humans are social animals. And to me, there is a huge social aspect for for going to stores, whether it's an electronic store or whether it's a clothing store. Just talking to the salesperson or actually holding something. So one of my favorite examples, especially when it comes to electronics, is if I have to buy, and because this is something that I did recently, when if I wanted to buy speakers, I didn't want to go online and buy it. I mean, eventually I went to the store and bought it, but I like to listen to these different ranges of speakers out there, which is not possible in an online world. When it comes to clothing, I mean, there are returns policies online, but I can tell you a lot of people who don't return. They just say, they buy it and they don't like it. They don't necessarily return it. They just leave it there, and it leaves a fairly sour taste. So you can try your clothes on, and there is much better. You see a human being out there, and some people don't care about it, but I think a large swaths of population do care about the human interaction of actually going to a store. I think the other aspect is that as humans, there is this instant gratification thing that happens, and in an online world, that is pretty much impossible to happen. So if you're buying something and you want it in your hand, there's no substitute for an online store. So that's something that you're getting. And the other big thing is you know what you're getting. And by that, what I mean is I've sometimes wanted to buy pants online, and I bought pants online, but the color that I see depends on the screen setting. And many times I've looked at the color on the screen and what I've received, and it's two different things. And that's happens quite a bit because my wife runs an online store, so that's an excellent example. And a lot of her customers will say, but this looked different from what was online. And so that it doesn't happen all the time, but I know it's happened to me multiple times. So that doesn't happen. You know what you're getting if you're in a physical store.
And it's an interesting point, that, because a recent example I think of is we bought some Christmas lights, and they can look very different when you receive them in terms of size, color, to what they look like in the photo. And even though the measurements are, I mean, I'm in no way saying they were inaccurately described, but the reality is sometimes these things are hard to imagine and hard to visualize without actually seeing them in front of you. And I guess coming back to our earlier examples, I guess that's part of why, say, books is very straightforward, because actually a book, you kind of know that it's not going to be the size of a matchbox when it arrives, and it's not going to be the size of a car. It's a very standard form, and same with CDs, isn't it? You kind of know what you're getting physically. Other things are harder to judge. And I guess those are some things about the actual choosing and the buying experience. But I guess there are also aspects of almost the social experience of going out to the shops that for some people has an impact.
Oh, I think from a personal standpoint itself, I couldn't wait as soon as the first lockdowns ended to go. I didn't realize I missed stores that much because every time previously every time a salesperson tried to ask me, I would always say, "I'll get back to you," or "I'll call you if I need you." But there is this social experience that is undeniable and something that you would never get anywhere else but a physical store.
But I suppose, although we see all these advantages of physical in-store retail, it's also fair to say that retailers generally, but also specifically physical retailers, bricks and mortar retailers, have been facing challenges. And I know this was also talked a little bit about in the chapter in the report. So let's hear another extract from the report that talks about that, Sunil, and then I'll come back to you to see how you think people can be addressing those challenges.
We can view the challenges and trends faced by the retail industry from 3 different angles. Firstly, there are the external trends linked to the ecosystem and the market itself. Secondly, there are the expectations from customers as the buyers and shoppers. And thirdly, there are the challenges faced directly by merchants as the sellers of goods and services.
So quite a range of challenges facing in-store retail. And one that I think jumps out at me, and I think our conversations earlier made me think about it as well, is it called showrooming, where, because we talked about wanting to see, touch, feel products, but if you know you can buy, like if it's a camera or a laptop, if you know you can buy the exact same product online cheaper, some people might go to a shop to have a look at it and then place the order online using their phone a few minutes later to have it delivered the next day. So is that one of the kind of specific challenges you've seen, Sunil?
Yeah, so that's exactly it. I mean, because a lot of these brands or people spend money in terms of building out these stores in these high streets, and it costs a lot of money to run this, but a lot of buyers do indeed come to these stores, they have a look at it, and they buy online. So it's a lot of effort wasted by these particular brands or in store, whether it's a boutique or whether it's independent or a larger brand, they do all face this particular problem.
But then I guess it makes me think of 2 things. So one is, of course, the idea of Apple stores, where Apple doesn't really care whether you buy in the store or not, because it's still a sale for them. So they can afford to almost have the shops as the physical showrooms, and then where you order is irrelevant. But I also had a personal experience. This was buying a car seat, so it must have been getting on for 10 years ago. And I remember going to a physical shop, and they had one on display. It was the one we wanted. We looked at it, we liked it, but then we wanted to buy, and they didn't have one in stock, and they wouldn't sell us the one that was on display. But they said, oh, you can queue up here if you like, and give us your address, and we could deliver it to you in 5 days' time. And it was like, well, and we ended up ordering online at home, but not for a price difference, but just because we didn't want to wait, firstly in the shop and then for several days to have it delivered, when we could get it faster and probably cheaper, but I don't remember, by ordering it online. So I guess how, for Apple it's easy, isn't it, because they're controlling the whole ecosystem. But how does a physical store chain or an individual shop that's stocking products that can be purchased elsewhere, how do they tackle this kind of challenge of showrooming and people jumping ship?
So I think a useful way to do that is, and I think it's talked about quite a bit, is this omni-channel method of shopping, where and just given the fact that what you talked about your car seat is that it's physically impossible for the store to stock every kind of car seat, and it's impossible. If it's out of stock, it is out of stock. There's nothing they can really do about it, and stores, it's impossible for them to do a just-in-time kind of inventory filling. So I think it would have been at that particular store if they said, why don't we check our website? And if you ordered it right then, they were going to deliver it at home tomorrow. So you would have most likely bought at that store, as opposed to having gone home, went to a different website. So they've lost that sale, and they made sure that you gave business to a competing retailer.
And it's also, coming back to your point about stock levels, I was just thinking how even if you could build a store that had all the stock of some of the online giants, so even if you could build it and stock it, it would be impossible to navigate. A consumer would never be able to. So in other words, it's a reminder of how online retail is no longer replicating physical retail. It's doing something that that simply can't be achieved with physical retail. And so, as you say, then you have to find the unique aspects of a physical store that provide added value that you can't deliver online.
I mean that brings to my previous point of this sort of these online spaces. They place a lot of emphasis on the UI UX part because Amazon, which has and I keep using Amazon, but any other website that has probably a million SKUs with them, you can find what you're looking for in a matter of in under a minute, and they've designed it in such a way. So an offline store, a physical store that has an online presence doesn't need to necessarily stock everything in their store, because a consumer gets turned away the moment they step into a store and they see a pile of junk in front of them, and so they would rather have the option of looking at items, but also know that they have this added convenience of wanting to buy, that they can also buy online if it's not available in the store. Because most of these physical stores usually will have a warehouse too. So that warehouse can obviously act as either a gateway for their online sales or for their store sales.
And the other thing, coming right back to your example of buying hi-fi speakers, again, it's something I remember from when I bought my first set of speakers. There's a shop here in the UK where they will set up almost as many pairs of speakers as you like, and then let you bring your own. It was CDs back then, but bring your own music. So they have a listening room. You can listen to your own music, and you can switch between different sets of whichever ones you want to test out. And I mean, of course, there's no better way to choose a set of speakers than to listening to music you want to listen to through those speakers and being able to instantly compare them with other speakers. But what I remember, at the same time, there were shops stocking speakers where they wouldn't even get them out of the boxes for you. You know, you could go in, you could look at the ones on display. But any that weren't on display, you could buy, but they were in a box and you weren't allowed to break the seal. And once you'd bought it, it was like a no returns policy. And I think what this conversation has led me to kind of understand is that, of course, shops like that are not taking advantage of the ability for you to be there, then really going to struggle to compete with online unless they compete on price. But there's a whole range of aspects of the experience where they can compete with online, or they can complement an online shop, which is impossible to replicate online. So I think it's quite fascinating. I guess that's been the shift, hasn't it? You now have to, if you're going to justify the cost and investment of a store, you really have to be providing something, some kind of experience or way of purchasing that can't be achieved online, because otherwise it's just not going to fly anymore.
Yeah, I mean, because there are now so many examples of retailers and large retailers who have died because they've not been able to. What you just said about the speakers and them being in boxes and not thing. I mean, that's just. And I think that kind of pushed a lot of people online too, because this sort of returns, you can return it in 7 days, 10 days. That, I think, changed that. And those who weren't able to adapt to this new environment, and I guess new environment 20 years or 15 years ago, there's so many obituaries of large brands, I think in the UK as well as in the US for sure. There have been many, many brands that are no longer there.
So before we finish up, Sunil, I just wanted to ask, are there any trends you see on the horizon then for in-store retail that we haven't already discussed?
I can see a lot of small stores actually going the sort of omni-channel way, where they've decided that we need to have that ability to offer customers the ability to either sell both online as well as offline. So there are a lot of apps that have come up now which lets even small stores kind of sell online, because I think people have the 2 years have changed a lot of people's mind, and especially small sellers. And I think offline stores are also understanding the fact that they need to provide a much better experience to customers, and they're trying to do, whether it's live streaming or sort of bringing the experience of the store home, I think you'll see a lot more of that happening. And I think you'll also see a lot more autonomous stores coming. But I think that, there's a lot of people who've said that in-store is dead, and I don't think that's close by any stretch of the imagination.
I was going to say, so maybe that leads us to, in our conclusion, trying to have the final answer to that question. So if I just go back and summarise what we've covered. So we talked a little bit about the growth of online and also the benefits that online has offered consumers. But then we also talked about some of the unique benefits that in-store shopping has always provided and can continue to provide. And then we talked about challenges and how retailers can overcome them. But I think what you've just said there, Sunil, is probably the overall answer, isn't it? That we're going to see a bigger focus on combining the in-store experience and the online experience. So it's hardly even omni-channel anymore. It's like everything blurs into one. Sometimes you're communicating with the shop via a device. Sometimes you're online shopping. Sometimes you're returning in a store. Sometimes you're in a store, but it gets delivered home, or you buy in a store and then it's collected from your home if you want to return it. But essentially everything combining, and not just for big retailers, but actually for all different sizes of retailers will be heading down that journey. So coming back right to that question of, does in-store retail have a future? I guess the answer is yes, we think it does, but it's going to be very different to the in-store of, say, 20 years ago that we saw when we were having our first experiences of online shopping. Sunil, it's been really fascinating to discuss this with you. I just want to thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure, David. Glad to be here.
Just a reminder to everyone that if you want to read that chapter about the renaissance of in-store retail, you can download the full report from worldline.com, and you just navigate to Knowledge Hub and then Scientific Reports, and you can download it there. In the next episode, we are going to be tackling the interesting question of what if you never have to pay for anything ever again? If you would like to contact us, suggest topics for future podcasts, give us any feedback, then you can reach us on ndp-podcast@worldline.com. Please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. And last of all, I just want to thank you, the listener, for joining us today as we navigate digital payments.
Thank you for listening to the Navigating Digital Payments podcast, brought to you by Worldline. Join us next time to learn more about the latest innovations, trends, and predictions for the future of payments.